Well, hello. This is The Final Boss, and this is my novel, The Distributor. I tried to do a edit of this a little bit ago, but my little one, my infant, was very fussy, and so that did not happen. So tonight, I am re-embarking on the editorial process of my own work. The Distributor, you can get the ebook now, the audiobook, and the hardcover are coming out in a couple of weeks. And so you should also get those. I would get both. But also, this is the beautiful cover if you want to find it on Amazon or any of the bookstores that are out there. And we also had a great illustrator do a lot of awesome artwork for the character. So if this is any inspiration to grab a book, check it out. I already started talking a little bit about this, but I'll jump back in and I'll just do a quick catch up on the things that I discussed last time, and then we can kind of move forward into new questions. Chapter 1, The Outpost. 30 kilometers today. Rocky terrain slowed me down, but if my projections are correct, my supplies should last till Madison City. It was after sunset when my resolve wavered. I'm ashamed to write it, but I looked back once. Plot's journal. So, these intro blurbs, epigraphs. I should actually Google and see if that's even right. Is it called an epigraph? Set it in a document. All right. Well, there you go. But yeah, these devices have pros and cons. I think it does slow down your graduation to the chapter, the speed of the read. But in this case, having another voice from the world, in the world, having the kind of, hey, somebody's journal, like a found piece of newspaper or whatever, all those little things add up and make the world feel more well-rounded. So because this is a sci-fi book and because so much world building is required and I need to make the world feel real as the writer, I generally use tools like this to give the world a more filled out appearance, like having newspaper clippings from the world, poems from the world, journal entries from the world. Those types of things in that world's voice can really make a work stand a little bit better on its own. Especially if it's like a sci-fi fantasy where you just have to do a lot more world building on the outset. Holding my breath, I soldered the last aluminum radial onto my new antenna. And I think this was right. I don't think I need this adjective. It slows down things, but it's there. I could probably have added it down here. Electricity snapped along the aluminum radials and a stink of burnt rubber. So again, this change, an electric pop and the stink of burnt rubber issued. So this compound subject does not feel as good. And this is something I'm learning in my most recent novel I'm working on. Is any way you can have the base clause of a sentence be as dynamic as possible, where you have a really strong subject verb, electricity snapped. Like, I know that's auditory cue. I know like what sparks kind of look like, so that gives the reader a lot more to work with and a lot more of a really, really strong launching point for a sentence than an electric pop and the stink of bird. Those are like two subjects, like nothing's happened yet, and we're delaying that verb until a little too late. I think if I was to go through and revise this, that would probably be one of the changes I would make. But here we are. But I think it's like pros and cons, but I do think that there are stronger ways to construct, especially these opening sentences. Issue with the mess of wires covering my lane 2 sand floor, but the antenna held. I withdrew my trembling fingers from the web of bright metal that I'd spent a week of work, all my remaining water chips, and countless hours of sleep deprivation to build. Okay, so the things I am glad the first paragraph is accomplishing is adding a sense of tension from the beginning, right? There's a character that's worried about some outcome. We don't have to know as the reader what it is, but we have to know somebody cares about something going down right now. And that's so critical for starting a story, and often that gets pushed down to here or down to here in other stories. And so one of the things, is any sort of indication of someone cares about something and it's in flux. Any way you can zip that in to the beginning of your narrative, you will be the happier as a writer, the sooner that's in there. In terms of these other things, yes, I think there are some ways to streamline. I am communicating a lot of detailing in this, which is a lot for a first paragraph. I tried to compensate for that with a really, really short, punchy second paragraph. That's just all gut feeling, interiority, interior thoughts. Like, please let this work. So that's the goal there, is to say, okay, can I account, keep the read moving really fast, even though this is a hefty first paragraph for a reader to get into. I flipped open my leather computer bag. I flipped open my leather computer bag's flap to let in more air and started redirecting power. I don't love that. This feels a bit redundant. Flap. I almost would just say I opened. Oh, I have to turn on my leather computer bag's flap to let in more air and started redirecting, because it's just simplifying the verb structure. Like, again, that's the one thing I've learned more recently. That's why, I'll probably have, I'm sure in all my writing I'll have notes like this for myself, but especially in, this novel was done, written quite a while ago. And so as I've kind of continued to, go to the writer's gym, exercise my muscles, the importance of that sentence level structure has only increased in my, in my mind and in my point of view as a writer. So obviously, like, that's where, I'm going to immediately kind of have a knee-jerk reaction, but it's good to kind of be aware of. Letting more air and started redirecting power from my backup ground radar to my shiny new antenna. I like the shiny new antenna. Just gives the same context in a little bit of a modern understanding, to say, oh, this is fancy, this is nice, this is something this character cares about because it's nice. Like, so kind of pulling in some of those idioms in the ways we talk today, like shiny new car, whatever, into this world to help. My goal is just to sort of build as many bridges from this world into the reader as possible, where without me having to put like a ton of context in it, it's understandable what's going on. And so this is an attempt to do that. You obviously can be the judge, whether it was successful or not. But this is, one of the things I'm putting in to try to say, hey, look, there's some modern language here that approximates to what this guy's doing with an antenna. A lot of readers might not know, what the heck is an antenna? They probably know what an antenna is. But, like, if they're not very technical, that might be really off-putting for them at the beginning. And so trying to just give some bridges in for the reader. Energy sizzled up the aluminum mass. Oh, you know what's probably happening too? Twitch loves to take away my category. And if I was a betting person, I would say this category is gone. Yes, it is. Writing and reading. Stinker. Man, I don't know why Twitch is so janky these days, but it's probably because of Jeff Bezos. Alright, cool. Well, whatever. I don't like him. I'm just kidding. Anyway. Energy sizzled up the aluminum mass, and for a moment the smell of ozone overpowered the stench of dried urine oozing in from the slums outside. So what are my goals here? Obviously, I'm trying to kind of pull the reader in with multiple senses, right? And obviously, this is a bit, yucky. But the goal is to say, hey, I want to have things that are visual. I want to have things that are auditory, snapping, and smell, stink of burnt rubber. So I'm trying to use, we experience the world through our five senses, right? Plus or minus. I know there's other people that believe we have different ones, all that thing. But yeah, it's one way we experience the world. And so my goal is to say, hey, I want to make this at least, give the reader something to imagine for each of their senses, which will help them put together that picture of the scene that they're in a little bit faster. And so again, all this is just how many bridges can I put between myself and the reader to make sure that they're on the same page as I am and they're understanding the drama. They can get through the drama and the characters as soon as they possibly can. On reflex, I grinned and glanced around for someone to share my victory, but nope, I was still alone in my ratty lean-to. Still all alone. So again, all alone is a bit idiomatic. Like, that's kind of how we talk today. Same thing, right? Just sort of, trying to give that sense of someone, looking up from their couch and realizing they've just been sitting alone in their house for however long. So a lot of these little, word choices are to make something as relatable as possible to my audience, which is the modern reader today. Clearing my throat, I tugged my green and black display out of my bag and checked it for new water sources, wells, or anything. A few blips appeared on my monitor's map marking. I don't love that this is alliterative. I would almost just go like that. A few blips flashed, maybe. I think that would be a little bit better. And again, this is just little word choicey things, but I do, and obviously, the water's under the bridge at this point with this project, but I do think that there are always lots of opportunities to go back and say, hey, everything is built off the sentence, and I do really, as a writer, believe that, and I find more and more and more that, all those pieces work in symphony. I think this novel has certain strengths that help it, do what it's supposed to do, but I think, the sentence level stuff is probably something that it could have been stronger at. And that's okay. That's why we learn and keep on learning. The water sites on my old scanner had already identified. My heart pounded. The supplies I'd wasted building this antenna, the hours, they couldn't be for nothing. Not now. And so I'm breaking some rules of grammar here. Why? And so one of the reasons I'm doing that is both because I'm trying to just make this a little easier to read. The reason I'm making rules of grammar here is because I'm using the character's internal thoughts. So with interiority, a lot like dialogue, you have a lot of license to kind of break grammar, put things, give fragments, whatever it's needed to kind of communicate the emotion, of what's being communicated. And so here, the supplies I'd wasted. So I'm trying to give a sense of, how much this person has invested. So I have this apostrophe here. The supplies I'd wasted building this antenna. The hours, they couldn't be for nothing, right? And so this type of pause, this type of suspense, can build up kind of where I want the sentence to land in terms of the impact I'm trying to give it to the reader. And so my hope here is that some of these these circling thoughts, the time I put into this, the hours, that cycle in the way this character's thoughts are going gives a sense of this person ruminating over it, being really stressed about it, and that it was not a trivial choice for them to make. They had to put everything on the line, which is, again, another one of my goals as a writer very early, is to set up the goals, the stakes, and the urgency behind the plot, right? So, what is this person trying to do? Why does it matter? And why does it need to happen right now? And so these, both for this character should realize and acknowledge that this is the high stakes situation, because if the character or the viewpoint character doesn't talk about it and get worried about it, the reader will have less of a chance to. And so, the goal here is to say, hey, look, how do I both on paper communicate the goals and the stakes of what's going on, and then also in a more abstract sense, describe the way this character is thinking in a way that communicates that. Oh, here, 1 second, little buddy's here. Dad. Good night, buddy. You want to give me a hug? Meow. Hello, meow. Wow.
Is that a piano?
Yes.
Can I just play with it?
Well, what time is it right now?
It's late. Poo-poo night.
It's poo-poo night? I don't know. I think it might be bedtime.
We got to say goodnight to baby Paul and Daddy.
Oh, you said goodnight to baby Paul?
Yeah.
That's very good.
We're going to go lay down.
Poke. Poke.
Okay.
Okay, buddy, come on.
You ready, Baba?
Poo-poo.
Yes, yes, it is the
Mom,
joke is the hour.
wait for me.
All right, I return. That's he's a sweetheart. Very moody in this phase of his life, but it is what it is. That's how the good Lord teaches us patience. Anyways, a few faded dots appeared over the west edge of town, but those were just static outliers from the distributor's jamming signal. The interference those pigs vomited over the barrens obscured half my map. I shook the monitor. Sands and stones, come on! And so, very common in sci-fi fantasy, kind of in-world, you know, not like, yeah, I guess curses, like in-world curses, right? Where, you know, this is a desert world, so instead of saying, you know, X, Y, or Z, they'll say sands and stones, you know, or whatever, or sands, you know, and so it does a few things. I think one is if your reader audience is broad, like if you know, want this to have a YA audience potential, you want it to have like, you know, middle grade. I don't think this is middle grade, but you know, you obviously need to think about that to say, hey, I want to make sure the content is respecting whoever the audience it's for. But also, I do think it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to show, hey, you know, what is so important, it's become kind of a curse word in this world. And I think this is one of the things that was really beneficial. Even in my new novel I'm working on right now, I have a page of curse words that each faction uses. You know, like I'm like, okay, these guys say these things as they're like, you know, blinding lights or whatever. And obviously, you know, some of it's like a little silly, but I do actually think it makes quite a bit of impact over the course of a project. Oh my gosh, my Unity. I was going to try to edit some or do some work on the game after this, but we'll see. My Unity system is very grouchy. Anywho. Alright, that's right. Application. Alright, sorry. I'm just getting Unity queued up so that if it does decide to work, I can do some playtesting and show you guys another part of my writing. It'll be more editing, more self-editing. The interference of those pigs vomited the barrens obscured half my map. Another headache hit. I reeled, trying to collect my thoughts. How long it had been since I had water? A day? 2? Again, because I'm using free and direct discourse, I don't have to use complete sentences. I don't have to respect grammar. This is a lot like dialogue. So essentially, the narrator, you know, like the third person narrator, often, you know, in close third person stories or first person stories like this, will, you know, kind of take on the character's thoughts and voice them with their voice in their way, the way they're going on in their head. It's a very handy tool to have in your tool belt. Free and direct discourse, I think one of the things that I found to be extremely impactful in terms of helping, you know, communicate a lot with a little, you know, or just get a lot of the world or the character put forward without having to, you know, really be like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm frustrated. You don't have to describe it. It's almost kind of like showing just the raw stream of consciousness thoughts rather than telling Jeff felt nervous, you know, like, you know, so I could say I'm walking into like a creepy old warehouse, and, you know, the one way of summarizing those thoughts would be Jeff entered the creepy old warehouse. He felt nervous and his stomach roiled, and he thought, I probably shouldn't, you know, stay here as too long, you know, for example. The other option would be Jeff entered the warehouse. What's that? I don't know. I'm freaking out. Just keep going. Keep looking forward. It's going to be fine. But why am I here? I should be going home. You know, like, so that is maybe more stream of conscious thought, but it's giving that same information, but in a more dramatic way, right? Like, I'm with the character as his stream of consciousness is coming through, rather than, you know, essentially just getting like the book notes of what, you know, experience that character had going into the spooky warehouse. My throat ached and I had like I swallowed a fistful of sound, and the tent finally opened. When the tent finally stopped spinning, my scan showed nothing. I cranked my signal amplifier to maximum power. My computer's hum. Oh, thank you, Cherry Bomb, and welcome. Welcome, welcome. So this is kind of a clunky phrasing. I think it would almost be like I amplified my signal to max power. I think it's just getting the more distinctive word in as the verb. So saying, hey, like cranked, I guess it kind of, again, it all comes down to pros and cons, right? So I think cranked in some senses, you know, we in our world and our audience knows the term crank up the volume or crank up the heat. So I think that might have been one of the goals of using that as the core verb to say, hey, this is a familiar thing this person's doing. Also, maximum power feels super clunky. Just feels like a spaceshipy. I would just look for a different word choice. Let's see. Oh, there we go. The final boss one, anyways. All right. No, this is the name you should search if you want to find the book. I had all over my display, cradling it. Give me something, please. A smoke, a hint of it. I jerked upright. No, not smoke. Burning solder. Oh, sans. No, no, no. Okay, so again, this is not in quotes, right? This is free and direct discourse. This is the narrator essentially just giving us this character stream of consciousness thoughts. And because it's a first-person narrator, it's especially easy to do that. I alleged the amplifier turned it off a breath too late. My gorgeous new antenna drooped, wobbled treacherously, and began to melt. Cursing, I grabbed for it. On reflex. I would almost take away the cursing and just do like on reflex. I grabbed for it. I do want this to be on suggesting. Big mistake. On reflex, I grabbed for it. Big mistake. Because this one is spacing out the setup and the payoff, right? Like, so this one, I want the events of the story to be happening quite fast at this point. And so the fact that, so this is actually one I wish I could have gone back and edited, but it is what it is, right? And then this is the thing, like, and this is why I'm glad to do an edit on a chapter that's already out, right? Because like even though I've gone over this 100 times, like every time you read something, you kind of see it from a new angle, and it's always very, very valuable to sort of be able to look down and say, hey, what was working, what wasn't? You know, has my point of view on these decisions changed? I think for here, I'm less worried about him cursing, like it's kind of like expected. Much more worried about, on reflex, I grabbed for it. Big mistake. Right? And then you can I grabbed it. And reflex, I grabbed it. Big mistake. I don't know, grabbed for it. I think that's okay. Hot agony lanced up my arm. I howled and reeled back, my head rocketing into my lean-to's torn canvas roof. My antenna swayed once and collapsed into a melted heap. I think this once is also extra. So again, like a lot of these like little words that just aren't pulling their weight work-wise. It's it's like, are these words doing their job? As weird as that sounds, it does add up. Assertion. It does add up after a while. Where if you have enough, and I don't think this is too terrible. Definitely in my first drafts, when I have to go through and do a second, third draft, this is one of the things I always am finding about my own writing is I'm often putting in more stuff that needs to be there to communicate. Because essentially, like, you're not in my mind with writing, you're very seldom trying to describe everything to the reader, make sure they have a perfect picture. As I've kept writing, I've realized that my goal is better when it's really to give the reader enough of a scaffolding to imagine the scene themselves. Because in so many ways with writing, the reader is the storyteller. They're the ones sitting down and reading through a story and telling it to themselves. And so that's why I believe that, giving, your goal is not to show the reader how great of a storyteller you are. It's to empower them to imagine this wonderful story with your narrative aid, right? And it's kind of a weird way of thinking about it, but I found that it's helped me at least. I don't know if this like camera, masking thing is helping at all, or if it looks like I'm like melting. But yeah, let me know if it's helpful or annoying. Both are valuable answers. I'm debating on just turning it off, and like I have like a white background behind me, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, if there are those who are on chat who wish to share, you're more than welcome to. The bubbling remains of my masterpiece cooked the sandy floor into glass, and the acrid smell of my own burnt hair joined the reek of smoke. So much for finding water. So again, okay with using a fragment here. I contemplated my own stupidity at hitting my solder's melting point and slumped beside my computer as it automatically switched to its backups, an old antenna, little more than a coil of wires, and my salvaged ground-penetrating radar unit. Just to spite me, my display cheerfully reported the known wells within a much smaller scan radius. I glowered at it for a minute before I noticed that something was very, very different. So I've gotten feedback, and I think it's on point, that this is a little bit a Deus Ex, right? It's a little bit. I'm okay generally when it comes to your inciting incident, the very, very first big moments of the story. I'm okay with chance playing a big role. Where you get in trouble if chance makes things work out or not work out for your character is at the conclusion of the story, right? So like in the setup, there can be some coincidences, there can be some weird things happening that kick off this wild chain of events. That is a valid critique here. I think it is a little bit like that, but I think even as a writer, I felt comfortable doing that because I, opted for something that would get me into the plot as fast as possible, and I was okay taking on some coincidence in my plot, especially in the beginning, because the cost isn't as high. It won't really bother your reader unless you're, doing something quite egregious. Ranks of hidden outpost weapons, caches, and vaporizer banks glowed brightly in the area of the map where the gray jamming haze had lain. Over the years, the distributor had branched out from their headquarters, a walled city in the far west. That jamming signal hid an infrastructure that gave them absolute control over the water supply and, heck, nearly everything else out here in the Barrens. So, jumping in, so I'm kind of using the stimulus of the scene to jump into backstory. And do I do it perfectly? Probably not. But my goal, at least, is to say, hey, look, something happened in the scene. I get a little bit more detail about what happened, and then that detail opens up to the, narrator taking a beat to just give me some backstory before we jump right back into the present. Now, something had exposed their network, and I'll move my head. There you go. And so a lot of this is, trying to do a lot in chapter 1, right? Which is to say, okay, I want to keep the active scene going. I want to keep the core scene moving forward. Something's changed. There's a new discovery going on. But I also need to start dripping in context about why this is important. When I mention the distributor, so I think I mentioned the distributor offhand a few times up here, but I don't pause to give more details. I just say, okay, the distributor, shame on them. And then poof, we're off to the next thing. And there's kind of two things that factor in the decision. This is when you'll need more context. So the second the reader gets to a point where, okay, their jamming signal died, this is going to start changing the way the plot moves. It is time to say, okay, I'm going to zoom in and actually give you the details you need to understand, at least enough to not be confused going forward. And then using a part of the scene where things kind of slow down. There's been a new stimulus. I'm getting it, it's sort of like something's happened. The emotional reaction. the thinking about it, and then you can kind of go into the backstory, right? The distributor's generating signals had vanished, and then we go to this, and then, we kind of go to the backstory, and then we jump into like an emotional reaction. Now something had exposed their network. This was wealth. So, hey, if somebody's saying this in their head, that means they are really starving for cash. This was distributor secrets laid bare. This was not possible. I verified the scan's integrity. Then I verified it again, but everything checked out. Sans, that struck gold. I crouched over my computer, isolating the highest value sites. Halfway through saving all the scan logs, a thought struck me. Did something do this, or was it someone? Dad had the technical know-how to trigger an outage of this scale in his sleep. Could he be punishing the distributor for stealing his tech? It'd be his style to pull something huge like this. Maybe I was closer than I thought. I shook my head. I couldn't do this now. I had money to make. I stood. I stuffed the still smoldering wires back into my computer bag and looped its strap over my shoulder. Hardly anyone in this part of the Eastern Barrens knew a darn thing about computers or any other tech left over from the last America. I was probably the only person who'd seen the signal drop for thousands of kilometers. That made me valuable. So again, this is an example of kind of what we did with the distributor earlier, but I'm not pausing to give context because it's not necessary here, right? So this is a character's thoughts. They're just kind of thinking and discussing their thoughts as they occur to them. So a name might come to mind like this, or any other tech from the last America. It's just a thing in this world, right? So it's doing a few things and establishing that, hey, there are some ties to this world. It's not, it's not a strange planet. It's something that's, in the far, far future, or hopefully the far, far future. And I need to get some more water. Talking. I was probably the only person who'd seen a signal drop for thousands of kilometers. That made me valuable. But yeah, so I'm not giving the extra context of the last America was, the greatest civilization ever to civilize, and it had a strange, end, and blah blah blah. Not getting into that. That does get talked about what happened with it later. Like it's sort of the very typical, well, not super typical, but just the concept of the idyllic world and a cataclysm that leads to the post-apocalyptic world, which is where we are now. It's not necessarily a fully idyllic world, but that's kind of the way these characters look back on it. A broken distributor transport caravan or abandoned cache would tempt the most careful of the crew bosses, and I just uncovered fully stocked outposts. I needed to find a boss with enough guts and water tits to pay me for my discovery. I threw back my lean-to's tarp and hurried outside. Oops, wow, that was really a page down. Paged down like crazy. Allie writes, welcome. How goes it? That was like a very aggressive page down. All right. I shook my head. I couldn't do this now. I had money to make. I stood. I suffered. A broken distributed transport caravan or abandoned cache would tempt the most careful of the crew bosses, and I just uncovered fully stocked outposts. I needed to find a boss with enough guts and water chits to pay me for my discovery. I threw back my lean-to's tarp door and hurried outside. After traveling halfway across the Barrens and back, all the crappy little slums. So this is actually, I'll read this paragraph and I'll talk about what I'm at least attempting to do with it. After traveling halfway across the Barrens and back, all the crappy little slums and the crappy little settlements started to look the same. From a distance, they were a brown scar of refuse and encampments, staining the endless sea of pale dunes. And up close, they were worse. Okay, so I'm doing a few things, right? I'm letting the character describe the scene by using habitual time or a summary of other scenes they've seen before. And the reason I'm doing this is because it gives me the ability to say to the reader, hey, I'm describing this one scene and I'll go in detail, but this is, representative of a lot of other cities in this world. This is representative of the state of this world. This is what the world is like. And even the character is going to call that out and say, oh, this place sucks like everywhere else. And this is why it stinks. And that's a very, very helpful tool to use. Even if you're in third person, you can use similar structures like this to let someone describe a scene through generalization about the world around them, and then all of a sudden you've kind of done double duty. You've described your scene, but then you've also given some pretty clear indicators about how this scene looks a lot like the rest of the world, and maybe what the rest of the world looks like on its own. And up close, they were worse. I squeezed my arm over my mouth. So again, I'm sort of trying to jump into the senses. Obviously it's these are crude because this is like a very intense, slum in this, desert world. But a lot of it is just trying to say, hey, look, when I am going in to describe something, we experience things through our senses: sight, smell, hearing, sound. I want to try to bring, sort of just like giving the reader the most tools you can for them to imagine it themselves really clearly, right? Because again, the word is trying to support them being storytellers themselves. This is, scaffolding for them. And so, we can jump in here. Did I squeeze my arm over my mouth to hold off the stink and hurried through the winding footpaths between the slum's faded tents. Most of the desiccated souls living here looked more like sun-baked corpses than people. Their heads were always bent, as if counting every grain of sand passing beneath their blistered feet. Yeah. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. I'm going to grab a little bit more water. I don't know why I'm just drying out. All right. But yes, anybody who's, I don't know if maybe my chat's not working or something, but let me just make sure. If I've been missing chats. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so I haven't been missing chats. It's okay if y'all are just chilling and lurking. I totally respect that, but I just wanted to make sure it wasn't me being bad at computers, because that is a very high probability risk. All right. Alrighty. Excellent. Okay. Back to beeswax. Sure, I might look as worn. So this is, again, another way I'm using this character generalizing about other people to self-describe. One of the harder things in first, I don't think I do it perfectly here by any stretch, but one of the harder things in first-person narratives is to give the reader, because often when I, and even when I'm looking in a mirror, I'm not like, oh, I have brown hair and brown eyes. It's like, it's much more like, or what am I gonna, I'm thinking about something else, right? What am I gonna wear today? Where did I put, my medicine for this morning? Whatever it may be, right? Whereas, in this case, we I don't think it's always necessary. I think there's a lot of stories that, especially short stories, that get away with never describing the viewpoint character and just leaving that as one of the things the reader has for them. Hey, you're the reader. You're, in a lot of ways, this is just guiding you and telling the story to yourself. And good luck. In this case, I chose to kind of at least try to have some context about what this person looks like. Whether or not it was successful, I think, is still debatable. But anyways. But this is the attempt, right? Sure, I might look as worn and exhausted as them. So again, this is coming through comparison, right? So he's saying, oh, they're all looking down at their feet. Shame on them. They're all, defeated. They're all defeated. Sure, I might look as worn and exhausted as them with my faded jacket hanging off my bony shoulders like it had been thrown over a scarecrow. And yes, if I smiled, the outline of my skull stood out beneath the remains of my sharp feet. Just a little bit hammy, but whatever. But I was still different from them. And so this is, almost directly addressing the reader and saying, but in some ways you get away with it because it's reflecting on itself. But I was still different from them. I refused to stare at my feet. I looked up. I'm not book buyer. Hello and welcome. How's it going? You are anyone who's a book buyer is loved by writers all around the world. Well done. You do any writing and stuff yourself? Non-descriptors is the main character. The first person becoming more popular as fanfic writers make the way to publishing. Yes. Yes, and even in like literary fiction, it's not uncommon it's just a first person character. It's completely up to the reader, to make that call. I think there's some trade offs. Like, I think the reason I pushed to have a pretty detailed description of my main character was twofold. One is I wanted to establish that the way this character sees themselves and their appearance is linked to them looking down on everyone else and saying everyone else in this world is defeated. They've all given up, but I'm like, so he's a very arrogant character in the beginning. And so that's, this person's almost, this character's almost reiterating that to themselves as they're walking. I didn't stare at my feet. I looked up. I looked up at those people who turned to profit. I'm looking at the perpetrators. But I'm in school to be a book publisher. That's awesome. Well done. Well done. Keep up the great work. I think, finding, it's a lot of fun. The world of literature, I think, is always near and dear to my heart, and I will always be cheering anyone on any side of the world of literature, writer, reader, publisher, distributor, what have you, frequenter of Barnes and Nobles. I will always be cheering y'all on because I think it's amazing. But welcome. Any books, and also if you guys do want, the ebook for this is out. It is released, so you don't have to take my word for, am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? You can, be your own judge. Say, hey, did Jeff make some mistakes here? I'm totally accept the fact that even after many, many revisions, hours of work, I've probably got a lot of things that could still be improved on this story. And I think, for me as a writer, it came down to I almost 30,000 or 3,000 physical books. That's amazing. You rock. Dude, that's like Scrooge McDuck's vault of books. That's amazing. Well, if you do want to add one more to your stack, feel free to check this project out. And, my publisher will beg you, and I'm sure if you're getting into publishing, you'll notice they will say, please write a review. It turns like I didn't even realize this, that how critical Amazon and Goodreads reviews are to things. So yeah, they were like, get reviews now. Like, I was like, well, what do you need me to do as we launch this? Because we're launching the ebook, and then we're launching the audiobook and the hardcover in a couple of weeks. And that was like the one thing. They're like, get reviews. I have a Goodreads. Nice. That's awesome. Well, check it out. Add it to your to read list. I feel like that's like the easiest. That's called publicity. That's true. So you're already doing the publisher's work. I was trying to figure out. I was like, I don't know how publicity is free. Marketing is paid. True. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how like how to get in touch with some of these booktubers and stuff. But as I get older, I'm just like, oh, I'm tired. I'll just write the next one. Write the next book. I know that's like totally the wrong mentality, and I should be more disciplined about doing marketing-y things. But such is life. The landowners' cabins and fields dotted the hills a few kilometers away. I always wondered if they kept their small fields and bony livestock in the view of the slums just to taunt us with the distributor's gifts. So again, trying to describe the world, but describing it through that gotta make it TikTok. I have a TikTok. The publisher are with. This one is getting published by the Story Plant. They're East Coast, I think in like Atlanta. Really nice folks though. Had a great experience. Story Plant. But yes, I think I do. I don't even know. Let me see. I'll share my TikTok here. See, look at how but I am striving to become a well-behaved writer that's easy to market. Is that how it works? No. All right. There we go. All right. Yeah, but this was published with the story through the story plan. Really nice team. 10 out of 10 experience. Refused to share my feed. I looked it up. Okay, we got the. My fist tightened as I marched through the tent toward the circle of old buses in the center of the slums. I'd sell my information to buy gear and a few more months of life here in the Barrens, and that could give me time to chase this new lead on Dad. He had to be behind this somehow. I just needed a crew boss willing to pay for my discovery. My hands shook as I sidled up to a long bus that had once been painted yellow. I hoped this gamble wouldn't kill me. Crew bosses could be temperamental. I hoped. So again, this is a bit of an error where I'm starting the same starting with the same subject verb clause in very close proximity. Is it showing it's not out yet? So yes, the hardcover has not released, but the ebook has. So that's the one that they're discussing currently, and then the hardcover is coming out in March. They wanted to do a staged release, so they were like, hey, we want to do ebook, get some reviews, audiobook, hardcover, and kind of sequence it. So that's great. I kind of, it's sort of like, I just listen to what the experts say and just nod my head and say that sounds good to me. I hoped Ivanovna wasn't feeling grouchy today. I'd worked with her when I'd arrived in town a year ago, but she hadn't contacted me for more jobs after those first. So again, more work after those first jobs. Since then, she'd risen to become one of the biggest boss in the slums. I took a deep breath and knocked on the rusted bus's back bumper. Bus's back bumper. It's a little alliterative. Again, that's like just kind of something I would be looking out for. But again, even no matter how many times you read something, something's always going to slip through the cracks. Oh, it's great. Well, I don't think it's very many reviews on Goodreads, but yeah, I think it's like out of 6 or something. Let me see. Let's see. Yes, I think it's out of what 4 reviews on Goodreads. 4 ratings and 4 reviews. I don't know what the difference is, but anywho. Hey, one day at a time, The rear door snapped open and a pair pop on their feet and become more well known. Yes. Yeah, I'm learning about all the. It is a whole. The marketing side of storytelling is a non-trivial learning experience. I'm actually right after I finish the next few lines, I'm going to switch to working on my game project, and that's been a similar educational experience because I'm doing game design and narrative design for games as well, and so it's a very similar experience of okay, how do we spread this out? How do we grow the audience? Yeah, 409 friends on Goodreads. That's awesome. Well, dude, if you feel inspired, if it feels like something that would jive with you, feel free to share it along. What is it? They like and subscribe. I've watched enough YouTube videos. I know. Like, subscribe, follow. There you go. I hoped Ivanovna wasn't feeling grouchy. I took a breath and knocked on the rusted bus's back bumper. Yucky. The rear door snapped open, and a pair of beefy enforcers wearing armor hewn from leftover cars looked at me. I half bowed and lifted up my leather computer bag. I've got something your boss will want to see. So again, this is another kind of modern writing thing. We haven't had much dialogue until now, but one of the things is a book club that might help. It's a great idea. I don't necessarily know how that would get started, but I would love, if you have any suggestions, feel free to, email them. Hey, you should talk to this person that runs a book club, or, or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm, I'm a tabula rasa, blank slate, and so I'm just sort of like, if there's things I should be doing, let me know. And somebody literally suggested this, right, which is to say, somebody on my game Discord was like, since you're publishing a book, you should, edit it. Like because I edit a bunch of people's stuff for free on Twitch just to, support the writing community. But they're like, well, you should do your own, and talk about some of the decisions you made and things that went well and things that maybe didn't, even though it's like, at a very late stage. And, so I was like, that's a great idea. And here we are. But yes, if you know of any book club stuff, let me know. There you go. Is join as a Goodreads group and ask if they can is join a Goodreads add to their to read list. Okay. I shall copy this. Paste it here. That's good to know. All right, they folded their arms and said nothing. Taking the hint, I took a tentative step back. Another boss might hear me out. A sharp female voice echoed from inside the car. If you're wasting my time with another foolish invention, you will not survive the visit. No, I wouldn't. You'd kill me? Man, I was a real charmer. Her enforcers smirked. So again, don't need dialogue tags too much. Even like the I said, especially with how, more often, almost invariably you're breaking up speakers by paragraphs. If you have a descriptor chunk like this, I know this is coming from I was a real charmer, right? I know this is coming from the point of view character. I'm in a grammar class right now. That's great. Oh man, I love the micro details of sentence structure and things, because it makes a humongous difference. That was the one thing I didn't really like, especially when I started doing writing. I was very much of the mind of like, story first. Like, who cares how it's written, the story, the plot. Like, that's what hooks you, and I think that's true in a lot of senses. But man, like, if you when something is really seamlessly crafted at the prose level, you're like peeling back a layer of fog between the reader and the story. And yes, like, the story is still, I think, critically important. It's the thing that gets me excited about novels and game writing. It's just the storytelling. But being able to have like crystal sharp prose and keep developing that, is the difference between a very foggy window between somebody and the actions of the story, and a very, very clear one. I think this one still has quite a bit of fog, right? And then the most recent novel I'm working on, I'm hoping that, hey, like, some of these tools, come to play and can make that glass a bit clearer. Her enforcer smirked and hoisted me inside. Even coming from the dim afternoon light, my eyes took a moment to adjust to the near darkness of Ivanovna's bus. She covered the windows with hunks of plastic to presumably keep out prying eyes, and a heavy cloth stifled the light attempting to stream in through the entrance. Ivanovna bent over an old wooden door laid sideways to form a table. Heaps of hand-drawn maps splayed out before her. Her broad shoulders filled the heavy cotton clothing that she wore like armor. Tension pulled her angular jaw tight, and she seemed to twitch away from drawing the ancient but well-maintained pistol on her hip. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. I flinched and blurted out, "I've found something." She pointed to the center of her desk. Proof. So again, no need for dialogue tags. This is it just reads a lot smoother, especially because most, whether it's comic book form, like, just the way that storytelling has changed. People are very primed to still understand 99.99% of what they're, receiving, right? And like a lot of the reason you add those dialogue tags and things is when it's not clear, when it's not understandable, you'll still put those in, you'll still keep them. But the upside with kind of a structure like this is that you get a lot more just time to describe and focus, and you don't lose very much. In terms of pros and cons. Of course, I tugged my monitor out of my computer bag and laid it out in front of her, pointing to the coordinates of the hidden outposts and cast. She studied the screen silently before she walked to the far wall where more maps hung and brought one over to her desk. Using a pencil, she marked the spot on the map where my data suggested the best stocked outpost would be. She gave me an incredulous look. The mark sat in the middle of a random patch of dunes. This is probably the last little point I talk about, and hopefully it's helpful. This is one of the goals is in clear writing is like a really clean line of cause and effect, right? And you kind of want to follow the moment by moment cause and effect of the scene, right? So this person is taking down a map, marking it, and then they're looking at Friedrich, and you think about it like you would set up a camera shot in a movie, right? Like sometimes you would show her marking a spot in the random dunes and then giving you an incredulous look. And that really comes down to how you, as the film director in some ways, want to line up your shots. In this case, I wanted the character to notice that what they were claiming was ridiculous right as this other person's calling it out with the reader. And so that's why I lead with almost an effect, like right on the line there of the cause is her giving this character a weird look, and then him looking around for why is she giving me a weird look, and then seeing the effect, like, oh, I was given a weird look because of this, because I'm making a claim that seems outlandish. The mark sat in the middle of a random patch of dunes among kilometers and kilometers of emptiness. My stomach fluttered. I know this seems a bit far-fetched, but the data I found is accurate. She barked out a cold laugh. Liar. It's what I found. You said the same thing when you sold me a working artillery mortar you found in a scrap pile. It works. You just didn't have ammunition for it. Who has ammunition for a mortar, Friedrich? Well, yes, but please, Eva, this is a rare opportunity. She folded her arms and frowned at me. What makes you say this outpost has the most resources? So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up because I do want to keep the video under an hour. But I hope this was helpful. I'm happy to do more chapters of this book or my current novel, talk about some of my decision making, less of like an edit. I mean, I did edit some stuff, so maybe just less of like a full edit and more of just like kind of a discussion of, hey, these are kind of the pros and cons that I noticed as I was going and writing this, and this is kind of where I fell on some of those decisions, and some of those decisions are ambiguous. There's, I don't think, a clear right answer for everything in a story. But anyways, I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out and joining me on this process, on this journey. And I'll still be right here. We're going to talk about my game next, so you can check out the game project I'm working on. And I'm just going to shuffle around OBS, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much. Ta-ta for now.